Hello everybody, it's me, Rival Gaz, aka Real Gaz, and welcome to this PhD update. Update 21, in fact. Now, it's been a hot minute, a good week, in fact. So many things have happened, and I really enjoyed this week. I want you to know that. I've got heaps of stuff to talk about. Lots of things have been up in the news. I should probably address the most important things first for the PhD and what it is that we got to do. So with our confirmation of candidature, you might remember that it's largely all written. It just needs a tone overhaul because I wrote it when I wasn't feeling that great. And well, times have changed, and you may also recall that I wanted to work a little bit harder on being a better ambassador and representative of my university, despite all that's happened. So putting aside my own troubles and allowing for the opportunity for new things to come and rewrite the story, those new things have begun to come my way. And they've also been coming the way of Lady Gaz as well, which is great news. For those of you who are new and you don't know who Lady Gaz is, she's the biggest supporter of the channel and was one of the original driving forces behind suggesting perhaps that there is something here that I'm doing that could be a real PhD. Now, my supervisor is away, and while they were away, two things happened at Charles Darwin University. The first being that strategic planning happened, and many interesting things happened for the university during that time. During this time, I took the opportunity to create a one-page pitch about game studies. I offered to bring game studies to Charles Darwin University. That was my plan. I didn't know if it was a good idea or a bad idea or anything, but what I did know after doing some research and after hearing that our university is what many call, in simple terms, AI friendly, I decided that I would send the pitch, but something happened and then I changed my mind to not send the pitch until, of course, I saw a tweet by Gary V. Now, if you don't know who Gary V is, you should go and find out because he has so much wonderful motivational things out there, and he's also into esports. So I saw this tweet, and basically, long story short, it was a now or never type of tweet. So I was like, you know what? I'm going in. And I sent it. I didn't hear anything back for a little bit, but I did hear through the grapevine that it is received and that they are checking it out. So you never know. In this pitch, what I did was just outline the state of the industry, what's happening in Australia, and the opportunity for growth and what it could mean for our university here. You may also recall that I reached out to Dr. Mark Johnson from the University of Sydney's Game and Play Lab. I asked him, hey Mark, how about you tell me about these games and play labs like what you have? Perhaps I could do something similar here. Fast forward, I sent off the pitch. I also have that World of Warcraft article to review. I feel bad, I must admit, for not reviewing it yet. The person who wrote it is probably sitting there waiting for good feedback, which is something that I hope to provide, assuming the article meets the rigor. I too have an article coming out in that journal, but I have yet to commence the writing phase. I have been researching though. Something else that I've been doing that you may have noticed on our YouTube channel and other social media channels is that I have been editing and producing content, making all my little videos based on everything that we've been doing during our stream on Kick in the last 2,000 hours of streaming. This is effectively the artifact creation part of the PhD. Now, I understand that I haven't completed confirmation yet and that we do not have ethics yet. That does not mean, though, that what I do and who I am outside of the doctoral training program, it does not mean that I suddenly stop being a creator and I suddenly stop being the thing that we are attempting to research and understand. So I'm making all the content and I'm having a lot of fun. It's been really brilliant to get more experienced with Adobe because it's a skill. There's also a lot of advancements in editing, direction, style, aesthetics in the content space. Particularly, it varies on who you follow and what you're trying to achieve. For me, I want something that evokes a sense of nostalgia as I'm an older gamer. I want something that reflects the moment and doesn't take away from anybody else's creations. So, for example, when we did the final fight of Final Fantasy 16, including a review video for YouTube, the quality of that is intentionally lower. So we didn't produce something that was meant to be in 4K whiz bang, Sabrina Carpenter looking good like that. It is just more meant to be relatable for this cross-section of gamers that I feel like I relate to and understand. Nonetheless, though, quirks and charms aside, creating artifacts, digital artifacts, and physical artifacts are all part of the process, and these are all competencies that I have to be able to demonstrate as part of my PhD. So not only do I have to be able to do all the scholarly activities that is expected from a researcher, I will probably also, and most likely, not probably, but definitively, have to continue to develop my research skill set for studies of all sorts and varieties because my work is interdisciplinary. But as I'm doing a artifact exegesis thesis whereby we do a reading of the artifact, I have to create the artifact and curate the artifact. And part of creating these artifacts is to make sure that they're in alignment with what we're seeing out there in the industry, in the discourse, in social media. And I'm pleased to say that we're doing that. I wish I was faster, but I can't go too fast. But I am trying my best. I'm a one-man band after all. Maybe with some more time and resources, things will get better. But this is basically largely where we're at. One thing that did happen as well is that we were able to break down the stream room and rebuild it. So we checked all of the equipment, making sure it's all serviceable. We cleaned everything top to bottom. We rearranged things. We're prioritizing things like ergonomics and aesthetics, and we even did a little bit of feng shui, got the bagua out, doing what we need to do to bring in the positive energy and to release anything that could be holding us back. I made a post on Twitter about how many pro gamer wannabe types get too stuck into the gen side of it, whereby they are just really living as if they have depression. Now, I understand my character, Rival Gaz, does this intentionally in the content, but it's not really a reflection of who I am or what I am. That's simply Rival Gaz. So it was very invigorating to be able to return the stream room to some sense of normality, and it is significantly better and more usable. And I am very confident that when we return to do gaming and streaming in the future, everyone will be pretty satisfied with the changes we've made, but we still have many more changes to go. I don't want to return to streaming unless I can show some form of progress to my community and all our fans. So there you have it. The confirmation of candidature ideally should have been in this week, but my supervisor is still away. Oh, and I did not mention that there was a high degree by research conference going at the time. I do believe I was invited, but I did not feel like I was in a mental health space to participate. I also felt a tremendous amount of pressure to keep going with all the work that I have to do. Also, shout out to Andrew Huberman for liking my tweet. Speaking of Andrew Huberman, he did come out with optimal protocols for studying and learning. And he also came out with foundation protocols as a concept. This is all in conjunction with his latest book, no doubt. Now, I'm going to do a listen and react to his How to Study and Learn episode. I think that will be very beneficial for all of us. But I also want to put it out on the record that I would very much like to create my own foundation protocols, or at least my own spin on the idea for what it takes to be a really good gamer. Obviously, it will have to be evidence-based. I would like to maintain some kind of rigor. I wouldn't want it to be too bro science, but considering the space that we're in, a little bit of bro science may help just to get us started in the meantime. Also, I would like to take this moment to thank everybody who was with us in Season 2 that we recorded on Kick, because we have our fan rewards out. So this morning, before I came on this talk, I was signing posters. Let's use this moment now to digress into a few other areas that I have seen on the internet that I would like to talk about. As you know, with many of these PhD updates, I talk about things that I have encountered on the internet. The first is a MIT study that explains why laws are written in an incomprehensible style. What does this have to do with gaming? Well, this convoluted legalese, according to MIT News, used in legal documents conveys a special sense of authority, and even non-lawyers have learned how to wield it. Now, these MIT cognitive scientists are all about this convoluted and specialized language. What does this have to do with gaming? I believe that gaming has its own vernacular, and I do believe that gaming has its own dialect, so to speak, and higher order of being able to speak. It's just something that I intuit at this stage, and I've only seen like sporadic examples of it, proving its existence in the wild in a positivist sense, forgive me, might require some doing, but I certainly believe that it's there, and it certainly would be there in perhaps role-playing communities with high fantasy. Another thing that I'd like to talk about now is a Discord group that I'm in. I've noticed in this Discord group that there are many people, hundreds of people, effectively, that are passionate about gaming and are looking for, opportunities to do things. And they're all kind of just sitting around doing nothing. Not to make it sound bad. The way I put it was that there are resources underutilized here in the gaming sector. And considering how gaming needs to grow, how could we utilize this wonderful resource of people who are highly talented and skilled in gaming and game development, but aren't currently working, but are looking for something to do? Well, what I put forward on LinkedIn was that perhaps the people who organize this Discord group might want to organize some playtesting for the users of the group, because all they would have to do is play the game, play some betas. I'm not sure if you guys have seen how popular Black Ops 6 is and the beta just for that. People are expecting that in industry, that Black Ops 6 will ensure that the gaming industry breaks record profits or revenue this year. Not just Wukong on its own. Now, I may mispronounce this man's name, but Tian Zhao, the head of North America partnerships at Tencent Games, shared a very interesting post about the cultural impact of the game, as well as how it is a watershed moment for Chinese gaming industry. I would agree, and I want to put it on the record that I really have enjoyed the majority of Chinese video games that I've played, and I believe that there's so much potential there. China is such an interesting market. I do remember before I started my PhD, I was keeping a close eye on Naraka Blade Point. I was one of the few people on Kick that was actively supporting Naraka. The rest of them were trolls. So thank you very much for your post, Tian, because on the cultural impact of the game, he basically says how you grow up and then you play Spider-Man in New York, but now people have a chance to play in these Chinese settings, and I actually adore that. Speaking of Kick, there's a famous streamer there who's all about Call of Duty. I did mention before how Black Ops 6 is in beta. People are saying that due to the new movement mechanics in that game, controller players have a significant advantage over mouse and keyboard players due to the ease of being able to execute that movement. This is very interesting to me, but perhaps not as novel as the 1 million checkboxes game. We played this game on stream. Have you guys checked it out? All you have to do is Google 1 million checkboxes. The game is quite literally as it sounds, where you check boxes and there's a million of them. When we were playing it, we noticed that there were two types of players, checkers and uncheckers, people who would try to undo all your check marks. Let me tell you, it gets quite intense, and it is a wonderful way to waste some time. But speaking of wasting time, the PlayStation 5 Pro coming out with its new design that has a lot in common with Adidas. I'm wondering if they're going to keep this design going or not. To be honest, I hope they don't. The design is effectively the slimmer PlayStation 5, or if you just picture a PlayStation 5, it's the same thing with stripes, albeit thinner. I would like to think that they are going to come up with something a little bit more pro. I really appreciated the simple but special design of the PlayStation 4 and then the PlayStation 4 Pro, because you could quite clearly tell that one was more pro than the other. In my opinion, the current PlayStation 5 Pro reminds me of an older Alienware design. It's going to be tricky to take something that is so iconic and then make it more pro. I'm confident they can, but I don't know if 3 stripes is the way. Speaking of if this is the way or not, let's talk about Concord. Many of you will most likely not know what Concord is, but you may have seen it out and about. Concord is basically an arena shooter by Sony. And unfortunately, it is a flop. As of the 24th of August, so 6 days ago, at the time of this recording, less than 700 players were recorded as the peak amount of players of Concord, which is insane for a AAA plus studio backed by Sony. For example, The Lord of the Rings Gollum, a game that was also memed on for being a terribly made game, had more players by about 50. Which is not a lot of players considering how Black Myth Wukong had, if I understand correctly, 10 million copies sold within the first 3 days and 2.5 million concurrent players. Sony is projected to lose about $200 million. And I am wondering if they are increasing the price of the PlayStation 5 in Japan to recoup the profits. In my opinion, they should release the game for free with every new PlayStation purchase. They should also offer Game Pass or PlayStation Plus for free for every new purchase with these increased price hikes. Pulsar Gaming Gears, a different topic now, on peripherals, are releasing 8K dongles for their mice. They also have a variety of new hand shapes, grip shapes for their mice. This is a pretty big deal for people who are passionate about their mice. Everyone is different and holds mice differently. I am only at the beginning of the journey of determining how impactful things like super high polling rate, the speed of the mouse, all the technical aspects, as well as ergonomic aspects, how the mouse is shaped and so on, and how we interact with that mouse, how much of an impact this really makes. At this stage, I do believe that there are undeniable advantages for having superior technology over your competitors. However, how much of an advantage is really to be questioned. Cast your mind back to the Olympics when the Turkish shooter took bronze without using any specialized devices at all. He simply had both eyes open, which for many people, they kind of misunderstood, but apparently it's an advanced shooter's technique. Speaking of advanced techniques, let's talk about Hideo Kojima. Kojima is offering the opportunity to ask him some questions about his upcoming game and how he makes games. I wanted to ask him a question about audio, and so I have posted this question to him. And the question being, basically, how does he balance terrific sound, the incredible OSTs, that's the music in the game and the sound effects, with helping the player win the game? So many games have fantastic soundtracks and sound effects, but some games, particularly FromSoft games, come to mind, whereby there is not necessarily noise pollution, but the soundscaping and the sound design is such where it oftentimes just pressures the player rather than empowering the player. But that said, though, it is still so well designed that people can learn the fights with the music assisting them. There's just something about it where they have a balance, albeit sometimes it's quite challenging. For Kojima and the type of games that he makes, especially because he is trying to be so avant-garde and innovate, it will be interesting to see how he approaches balancing game audio, because on the one hand, sometimes you need the audio to get in your way, if that is the intention, and other times you need it to empower you, if that is the intention. Notice here the word intentions. I am interested in his intentionality with sound design rather than things just coincidentally working well, because many gamers, what they do is that they buy advanced headsets and specialized speakers and things like this, so that way they can get a gamer's advantage over others. Speaking of gamer's advantage over others, Supergiant Games, the creators of Hades, which is one of my favorite games that I got my world records in for speedrunning, is suggesting that Hades 2 will be coming to PlayStation 5. Maybe. It's still in early access. The game is not quite ready, which really bothers me, because I'm wondering if early access and beta testing and all of this stuff is just basically a new industry norm. And if that's the case, it's fine. It could explain why games like Concord did not work, because games like Concord are expertly made, and they were made in private and then released to the public. But what is the problem with such a strategy? The problem with the strategy is that you have no players, whereas what the other companies are doing, like Valve with Deadlock, is that they have players, thousands of players already enlisted, and they have so much time spent. They're already effectively sold on the game. And then when the game finally does come out, it comes out with players. This is something that I feel that Sony must work on. Fractal Design, just going in a completely different direction. They make cases, but they asked a very interesting question on Twitter X, which is as so. The question being, in story-driven games, which one would be your gaming style? Enjoying every side quest or focusing on the main story? For me, I said focusing on the main story, but approximately 69.3% of gamers said that they would enjoy every side quest. This is very fascinating to me, because most of this kind of side quest is bloat in a video game. It doesn't really add much. It's side quest. Does that make sense? It's about the story. It's a story-driven game. So why would you side quest and then no longer engage in the story? Yet, nonetheless, people enjoy every side quest, and then they suddenly don't enjoy the story as much as a consequence. Not always, but it is a possibility. consider for a second that a player might wander off and do something other than what they were intended to do. In Elden Ring, the game is directionless, effectively, so that's kind of thought of in the game. Eventually, you get good and beat the game. But in many other games, it's completely possible, like in Far Cry 5, to clip into a rock by accident and then have your entire playthrough ruined. That is right. You can clip into a rock, the game will autosave, and then your playthrough and save file is ruined. Speaking of ruined save files, Star Wars Outlaws by Ubisoft apparently had an update which crushed many players' save files, and in exchange and compensation for losing hours and hours and hours of gameplay and progress on your new favorite game, they rewarded the players with a trinket. Speaking of rewards for players, Battlefield 1 will receive the EA anti-cheat on September 24th. What this means is that in Battlefield 5, approximately 28,000 wrongdoers were removed from the game. I'm very interested in anti-cheat. I'm also very interested in anti-piracy measures like de novo. Why? It's simply because of my cybersecurity background. I don't want to elaborate on it too much further, but it is something that is on my mind. There is a smaller streamer who went viral because of being bullied by Twitch partners. I'm pleased to say that I've not really been bullied by Twitch partners, but speaking of Twitch partners and bullying, cast your mind back to the other week when those Twitch partners were all ganging up on the CEO of Twitch, Dan Clancy, because they weren't satisfied with the type of support that they were getting. Little do these Twitch partners know, or perhaps little do they really accept where they are in the market and just how much pull and reach and importance they actually have. They don't have much at all. So last night, that's right, last night, the day before this recording, Twitch was having some issues. Kick is having some issues today on the day of this recording. But Twitch's issues were that chat wasn't working and videos weren't loading and so on and so forth. And I made a funny tweet basically saying that that's Dan Clancy, the CEO, unplugging all of Australia and New Zealand from Twitch. Why is that funny? It's simply because I can tell, at least I can intuit, that the way that those Australian partners were received online and by the people at Twitch was not that well. I had a conversation with somebody who may be a doctor or a PhD, and they were doing Elden Ring and Monster Hunter, so these big action RPG games, with a saxophone controller. And they say here that they were learning the fight, and they said that Monster Hunter was a very repetitive thing, whereas FromSoft was a lot more engaging. This is very interesting to me because effectively, if you watch everybody who are pro at this game, these type of games, I was saying before that the game effectively is a rhythm game, or like Guitar Hero, or like Enter the Gungeon. It's still its own game though, that is for sure. Let's talk about some young fellas in the game. There's a gamer called Benji Fishy who retired from Fortnite 2 years ago, and they had won 600,000 in earnings. Now, 2 years later, they're back on Valorant, and they're making six figures yet again. This was reported by Jake Lucky, and there's a few gamers who have gone and changed games to go on and to win more money. This is an interesting concept for me because it's quite rare in traditional sports that you're able to simply change games. And speaking of changing games, some people might want to change companies. Riot Games told me that they had basically an open PTO policy, so paid time off. You effectively can have unlimited, you just have to be reasonable. It seemed really good. I would love to work with Riot. There is a streamer, speaking of perhaps needing to work and move on, that they have well over 7,000 subs, and they appear to be doing everything right. Like, they have the look, they have everything going for them. They have been streaming and champion of the platform for like years, but apparently they've never been featured, and they're effectively like shadow banned type of thing. This is nuts to me. This is absolutely nuts to me, how that platform, Kick, is able to like pick its favorites, and how Rival Gaz, myself, was picked to be on the front page. But this person with thousands, I'm talking well over 6,000 subs, has never been picked. Speaking of Riot Games, going back to Riot Games very quickly, they had an update in their anti-cheat system. And their anti-cheat system in Valorant and League of Legends is insanely effective. I'll have to share the graph with you. But if you look at the charts, it really is effective. And I would love to know how it works. And speaking of knowing how it works, why is it that Ubisoft is having so much trouble? And why is it that Sony and Concord are having so much trouble? How does the industry work now? Because even Skull and Bones, the pirate game from Ubisoft, is struggling. I'm looking at a screenshot here from Steam database that says on the 23rd of August, only 180 players were on that game. It's really, really tough. But speaking of something that should be tough, or if not impossible, is playing a video game without using a controller at all, just with your mind. It turns out that Neuralink's second patient is already playing CSGO with just their mind, which is pretty insane. If you don't know about Neuralink, it is effectively one of Elon Musk's pet projects, whereby we're all going to become cyborgs, to put it quite literally. More videos are coming out on YouTube, so please stick around and please check them out, if you want to, of course. This pretty much wraps up my PhD update for this week. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of stuff that I missed. Let me just take this final moment now to congratulate our next Chief Minister of the Northern Territory. I know, out of nowhere, right? Leah Finocchiaro. They're a friend of the stream, and they're really, really great. So congratulations to you, Chief Minister. I'm looking forward to all the wonderful changes and advancement for the territory. We also have a Northern Territory flag that we have for the set now too, which we'll be flying proudly. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap up for now and get out of here. Thank you very much for joining me for this PhD update. And hopefully next week, I will have more firm, hard PhD advances to share with you. But for now, it's been a really wonderful week learning the tools in Adobe, getting back out, making content and artifacts, and keeping up to date with everything that's going on. I'm hoping that maybe one day, and maybe one day soon, we'll be like popular. It's not about being popular. It's more about saying like we'll be able to do cool things like help a whole bunch of people get better at gaming. It's the same way as like Lane and Andrew do. And Andy as well. They're like my heroes. I would have those three, Kojima, and maybe Lex. I'd love to interview all of those people or have them read my thesis one day. And you never know, because you could. Because here's the thing about doing a PhD. All those incredible professors and experts in their trade at making video games like Kojima, when you do a PhD, you have to reach a standard globally, not just in your home country. Ideally, you will be a PhD that can be, as we call it in Australia, Australian Qualification Framework Level 10. So you can be level 10. That's the highest level. And then that applies everywhere because you were level 10 globally, because you did the thing with your PhD. Now you got to keep up. You can't just get a PhD and go, nah, that's the end of the journey. That's only just the beginning, guys. That's why I'm getting started on so many things now in advance in my career. Okay, I better go. See you all next week.